Hey everybody, it's Derek here. Thanks as always for stopping by. So I had read this book almost exactly a month ago, right at the end of Black History Month. In fact, it was the very last book I read for Black History, and I want to talk to you about it. All right, everybody. So I had told you about this book in the wrap-up for February. It's called Our Hidden Conversations, written by Michele Norris. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because she's the creator of the Race Card Project. And if you don't know what the Race Card Project is, it's a really interesting, I don't know, I guess you could call it a movement that I was not aware of, not until I read it. It started off with these little mail-in postcards, believe it or not, and now there's a very strong online presence. In fact, I've participated in the Race Card Project, and I'll tell you what my contribution was at the end of this video. But basically what it is every participant is encouraged to send in just 6 words on the topic of race. And it all started because of this, when people use the word race card, oh, he pulled the race card. It's a way of silencing people who have been affected by racial disparities and prejudice, specifically in the United States, because that's where this is focused from, although people from all over are encouraged to participate. And so she kind of turned it on its head, you see. She was like, okay, well, send in 6 words on the topic of race. It can be any 6 words that you like, and then there was another box to give context for those 6 words if you need. And, so she's had hundreds of thousands, probably millions by now, of participants and contributions here. And what's great about this, so it's got sort of a textbook format, as you can tell. When you look at this, it does not look like just a standard book. So it's very well illustrated. You've got long form stories of people who've contributed. You've got, some of them are only like literally the 6 words, and then sometimes you'll get the 6 words with maybe a paragraph and a picture, sort of like what's seen on this page here. And then, you'll have other ones where she sort of introduces certain participants with a long background on a specific facet of race that she wants to address, be it, mass incarceration or being mistaken for someone's nanny because, you as a Black person or an Asian, you have a child who, is mostly white. And so, being mistaken as the maid, for example, is a very common thing. And so you get the whole gamut here of people just saying random stuff like, for example, 1960s, Dearborn will haunt me forever. Or I'm from Detroit, well, near Detroit. So obviously, like, we don't know, we need the context to understand, what those 6 words mean. There's other ones like, sometimes I feel like a traitor. So you can kind of guess what she's going to write about there. I feel guilt for my ancestors. So obviously that's a white woman who said that. Some of these pages, you don't even have a story to go along with it. And that's actually what I liked about this is you do hear from all sides. It's not just Black people, although it is predominantly Black. You hear from Asians, you hear from Native people, you hear the broad diversity that makes up the United States of America. And yes, you hear from white people who, some of these white folks are resistant to the project of diversity, equity, inclusion, or they're resistant to race being in the public forum. Sometimes you even end up with Black people like that. For example, I'm thinking of individuals like Morgan Freeman, who, that clip, I think it's a Fox News clip that got blown up there. The right just loves him for this, when he said that, we shouldn't be celebrating, there shouldn't be a Black History Month, and I guess the interviewer was Jewish, and it's like, do you want a Jewish History Month? And he's like, no. And Morgan Freeman is like, Black history is American history, and the only way to combat racism is to not talk about it. He was dead wrong about that, by the way, and I think if he was taken in context, there would probably have been a lot more to add to that, that he would have added to that. But you see things like that weaponized, and you certainly see the forces driving the weaponization of clips like that. On the white side of things, like, I can't help being born white was one person's contribution. Actually, you know what? I'll just read you a random entry here. This does have a paragraph of context. Warren says, I try my best to stay out of the line of fire when it comes to race. As far as I'm concerned, as long as my own thoughts and opinions are private and locked away, if they aren't socially acceptable and I'm not hurting anyone, then why can't I think the way I do? Why do I need to change? I didn't do anything wrong, so it's not fair to those of us who just don't care about any of it. As sort of an anthropological, a psychological look at the makeup of all of the things that can be said about race, by virtue of the fact that there are people in the United States, quite a lot of them, who feel that way, it is good to get a gauge on what they're thinking. You need to know what your opponents are thinking about this sort of thing. And that's what I love so much about this book, is that the majority of it shines a light on what the average experience is for people in the United States living, the Black experience, living the Asian experience, living the Native experience. But you also get a little bit of the white experience too. People who are just kind of sick and tired of the whole race topic. I just think it's a really healthy project that Michele Norris had participated in. And it's such a pleasure to leaf through this. I mean, you got so much depth in here. You've got great illustrations. The font is really interesting to see, that you got lots of different font. And it's kind of done like sort of scrapbook style, and that's neat. I had heard of this book through Barack Obama on his X feed. And he highly recommended this. And I have found it was good because he was sort of letting me down on the past few recommendations that he had made, particularly like Colson Whitehead and who else? I can't remember off the top of my head, but they didn't really pan out. And I've found him really reliable overall for his recommendations. Well, he redeemed himself with this one. This was a really good recommendation. Our Hidden Conversation, What Americans Really Think About Race and Identity. You guys should pick that up if you can. It's a really fun read. It's not too academic. It's very approachable. It's kind of anthropological, kind of psychological. My 6 words were, let me read it to you here because there's some punctuation involved. I had put a fair amount of thought into this. It was diversity, semicolon, audacious, expensive, deadly, ellipses, that's ... worth it, in capitals. And I stand behind that. I think that if we're going to be a pluralistic society, a multicultural society, that's a very daring project. Like, that's a daring enterprise to undertake. And, given the real tragic history of race in the United States, you can't really aim higher than that to become a society that prides itself on its diversity and does it well. We're not talking about insular groups within one nation. We're talking about a nation of people from all walks of life and who've integrated into a society and, but still kept their cultural and their, social backgrounds. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's what every democracy should aspire to. What few objections exist against multiculturalism are generally in the way of they're not assimilating, they're not integrating into the host culture. And I think if that's really the worst that you can critique about it, that's really quite a small objection to the grand project of multiculturalism that most people say it's been largely a worthwhile project. And so that's the audacious part of it. And it's expensive. Not just in terms of more current accommodations like, say, affirmative action or, the DEI culture that has permeated some corporations, some of the marketing that's gone into it, or the redress, and especially in the cases of Indigenous Americans, even Canadians, which is where I'm filming from, Canada. It's expensive in terms of living up to certain treaties that have been made and historically broken in the past, giving back land in certain cases. As I mentioned, redress, financial redress. If something comes to light in the historical record where a particular group of people have been disproportionately wronged, at the hands of a particular corporation or individual, there should be, it's expensive, we should have that redressed financially. And then, of course, there's the social expense in terms of acknowledging, perhaps as a white person, that, I am born into a society where I can count on white solidarity, and it could, in the abstract, cost certain people some opportunities when corporations or when public institutions build into their program positive discrimination to expand the talent pool. There's many ways in which diversity can be granted expensive. Or the other thing that I mentioned there, deadly. I mean, my God, look over the American history of race, and it's a very deadly topic. There's been a lot of people who have died in the name of race. What are we going to do? Are we going to aim up, or are we going to become a monoculture of just a bunch of whites sitting in a room huffing on each other's farts? What's more expensive? That's my point of view. So that's why I say in capitals, diversity is worth it, all of it. The lethal aspects of it, the expense of it, and just the sheer daring and courage it takes to be that sort of society. Yeah, it's not going to come easy, but what sort of a society do you want to be? Are you willing to rise up to all of that? I certainly am. I think it's just about one of the greatest things a society can do. And yes, we can still accommodate certain minor objections, against DEI and things like that. For example, warning against becoming a society that is vindictive, or fighting racism with another form of racism and all the trappings associated with that. Of course, there's something to be said for all of that. But again, you're going to have to revert to some base level of identitarianism, collectivism that's just inherent in politics. You're going to have to resort to some of that merely in making that sort of objection, because there'd have to be some white who is harmed by it, right? So you're going to have to act in behalf of those who are claiming to be, to sustain damages in this regard. So there's no escaping the race topic. And in fact, that permeates the book too, is this discussion surrounding, has colorblindness really produced the outcomes that we wanted? There's a side of the argument that, colorblindness is a wonderful thing, and we, especially the law, should have no redress, no recourse to looking at each other's skin color. You may identify as someone who's colorblind or have these pretensions, but ignorance is not colorblind. There's another saying that I really liked. If you're not seeing me in my color, you're not seeing me. You can't just flatten procedural inequities and then throw up your hands and say, I did my job. Because what of all the inequities that have happened until that point and carry on in terms of just how slow culture is to change and adapt and accommodate those historical wrongs. So I really don't see that we're going to get out of the topic of race. I think how we accommodate the racial problems that we see, most particularly in the United States and all over the world, is to talk about it. It's how we accommodate every issue between specific groups, whether it's gender related, whether it's economic. We don't simply just apply arbitrary standards and say, oh, well, I rewrote the book so that it doesn't sound racist, it doesn't sound classist, it doesn't sound sexist. That's not enough, because culture tends to divide along those lines. So I really appreciated that more anti-racist model, that yes, colorblindness sounds wonderful and we can make all these pretensions in that direction, but let's look at the outcomes here. Maybe you can't flatten all of the outcomes, but you can flatten some of the worst ones, and you can try to mitigate what culture does as a matter of natural consequence, the inherent, the in-baked tendencies of prejudice and discrimination. So I think this book was incredibly healthy, and I just wish that a lot more people would read it, because it's become tiresome to hear cliched offerings that we see routinely in the public space on this topic. We could do so much better. At minimum, we could be having a much better conversation about race than we do. So read that. If you have read it, let me know what you thought of it. I would love to talk to you guys about this in the comments below, or perhaps in a follow-up video, depending on how those dialogues go below. And until then, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.